It was New Year's Day 2023 in Cohasset, a wealthy seaside enclave 40 minutes south of Boston along the Massachusetts Bay. Wife and mother of three, Anna Walshe, was expected to commute to D.C., where she worked as a regional general manager for a real estate firm. She would never make it to the nation's capital. Hours after she celebrated New Year's Eve with friends and family would be the last time the petite brunette would ever be seen alive. Less than a month later, Brian Walshe, Anna's husband of 8 years, would be arrested and charged with her murder. To this day, her body has never been located. Please join me for this special episode of Courtroom Confidential Case Notes. During my time as a DA, there were several different types of cases that were seen as the most difficult to prosecute. There were, of course, gang cases, cases where you had recalcitrant or uncooperative witnesses. Then you have cases with no eyewitnesses and cold cases. But I think the most difficult of them all would be what is called a no-body case. End of the day, you have no idea how that person was murdered. You don't know when or where they were murdered. And even the question of if a murder occurred still to some extent remains unanswered completely. To handle one of these cases involves incredible attention to detail. The prosecutor essentially has to weave together a tapestry of evidence, circumstantial and direct, so that the jurors are left with the idea that not only is this person in fact dead, but that the only person who could possibly be responsible for their disappearance and murder is the defendant. This is the type of case we are discussing today. In 2008, Anna Kripp was an ambitious, well-educated young woman of 25 from Belgrade, Serbia, when she met Brian Walshe, the son of a prominent Boston neurosurgeon. By 2015, Anna and Brian had married in Serbia and began to build a life for themselves in the coastal village of Cohasset, south of Boston. Anna worked as a regional manager for Tishman Speyer, a property management and real estate brokerage. Friends described her as a devoted mother who tried to maximize her time with her children and husband. While she would spend the work week in D.C., she would always return on the weekends to Cohasset to be with her family. You're talking about someone that worked 50 to 60 hours a week, got in an Uber to the airport and took a 2-hour flight, and then took a cab to Cohasset to spend a day and a half with her kids, a close friend told reporters. She's amazing. However, soon trouble began to brew when Brian's father died in 2018. Dr. Thomas Walshe left his son Brian with absolutely nothing. His will noted that Dr. Walshe was not in contact with Brian, bequeathing him only well wishes and nothing else. This led to a protracted legal fight over the doctor's estate. Brian was ultimately unsuccessful in contesting the will, suggesting that his father's signature was a forgery. According to the executor, Dr. Walshe had a severe falling out with his son, and Brian had ran off with a significant amount of his money, leading to nearly zero contact between the two over the last 10 years. Later that same year, Brian was indicted on federal fraud charges for allegedly selling fake Andy Warhol artwork online. Brian's LinkedIn profile says nothing about art dealing, but instead lists him as the CFO of a company called LETS, standing for Leadership and Effective Teamwork Strategies, which apparently provides cybersecurity training. His profile also shows him as the CFO of Capital Letters Consulting, which has little to no footprint online. According to reports, shortly after Anna and Brian married, a buyer saw 2 Andy Warhol paintings for sale on eBay. The listing included photographs of authentication stamps. The buyer arranged to buy the paintings, part of Warhol's Shadows series, for $80,000. However, upon receiving the paintings, the buyer discovered there was no authentication stamps and the canvases appeared new. Investigators believe Walshe gained access to the paintings by telling a friend, the lawful owner, that he could sell them for a good price. However, the friend told investigators that after Walshe took possession of the paintings, valued in the hundreds of thousands, Walshe vanished. Walshe was arrested in 2018 and would ultimately plead guilty to wire fraud, interstate fraud, and possession of fraudulent goods. By April of 2021, Walshe had pleaded guilty to 3 federal counts in exchange for a recommended sentence of incarceration and supervised release, and to return the stolen artwork. Walshe would not be sentenced until February of 2024. As we will find, something far more nefarious would take place in the months in between. Investigators now believe that Anna had started an affair with a man in Washington, D.C., and had even spent Thanksgiving of 2022 with a man in Ireland. The man told investigators he had been dating Anna for several months, and they also spent Christmas Eve together. The pair had planned to celebrate the New Year together on January 4th after she returned from Massachusetts. Anna's friends told investigators during this time her marriage to Brian Walshe was strained, and she was planning to move her children to Washington, D.C. Anna worked for a real estate firm in D.C. and would split time between Massachusetts, where her husband and children lived, and Washington, where she had a home for work. Anna had allegedly given her husband some sort of ultimatum over the federal fraud case, making it clear she wanted the children to be with her. By December, prosecutors say it had become evident that Mr. Walshe was suspecting his wife of having an affair. He was routinely visiting the Instagram page of one of her male friends, and on December 26, his mother, with his input and direction, obtained and hired a private investigator to surveil Anna Walshe in Washington, D.C. 2 days after Christmas, on December 27th, Walshe makes a Google search for, quote, "What's the best state to divorce for a man?" On December 30th, Anna flies home from D.C. to Massachusetts to be with her family during the holiday weekend, with plans to return to D.C. on January 3rd. New Year's Eve of 2022 would be the last time Anna Walshe would be seen alive. That evening, Brian and Anna hosted a dinner party at their home with a friend named Jim. The friend arrived at 8:30 p.m. and left sometime between 1 and 1:30 a.m. During the dinner, there was no indication that anything was amiss. According to a statement made by Brian Walshe, Anna and Brian went to bed shortly after their friend left. Anna told him she had a work emergency and needed to fly to D.C. in the morning. However, friends say Happy New Year messages sent to Anna were never returned. Brian Walshe told police that the morning of New Year's Day, Anna got ready and kissed him goodbye and told him to go back to sleep. He says she then took an Uber or Lyft to the airport between 6 and 7 a.m. Walshe later made breakfast for his boys. Walshe told police a babysitter arrived in the afternoon and he left home to get groceries at around 3 p.m. He then went to see his mother around 4 p.m. in Swampscott, about an hour drive from Cohasset. But he did not have his cell phone and got lost, making the trip longer than usual. Walshe claims he left his mother's home within about 15 minutes of arriving to run errands for her at Whole Foods and CVS. However, no receipts exist, and surveillance video does not show him entering either of those stores. Walshe told police he eventually returned home to Cohasset at about 8 p.m. But now prosecutors say the evidence from January 1st tells a far different story than what Walshe claimed. Despite his claims that he had lost his phone, investigators have revealed that subsequent analysis of his phone determined that it was actually plugged in the morning of January 1st. And while his phone stayed at the house, the oldest child's cell phone did not. Cell phone data from January 1st showed the oldest child's device had traveled to 2 stores. Surveillance video showed Brian Walshe walking into those same stores by himself. Additionally, at around 5:30 p.m. on the 1st, surveillance video showed Walshe and his vehicle going to a dumpster in the parking lot of a liquor store and disposing of items before returning to his car. Shortly after that, cell phone data shows the device traveled to the dumpster at an apartment complex where Brian Walshe's mother lived. The phone then traveled to a Lowe's store, where Walshe is also seen on surveillance footage. He purchased 5 5-gallon buckets, a hacksaw, 48 terry cloth towels, a full coverage suit, 200 disposable rags, trash bags, and cleaning products. The phone then travels to a CVS store where Walshe was also seen on surveillance video purchasing 13 types of hydrogen peroxide. Something else very sinister took place that day. Prosecutors have learned that Walshe made a series of Google searches from his son's iPad. These included, how long before a body starts to smell? 10 ways to dispose of a dead body if you really need to. How long for someone to be missing to inherit? How to clean blood from wooden floor. Returning to Brian's version of events, on January 2nd, Walshe told investigators that he took one of his children for ice cream at a juice bar in Norwell while the babysitter watched his 2 other kids. However, just after noon that day, prosecutors say Walshe had made several more Google searches, including hacksaw best tool to dismember, can you be charged with murder without a body, and can you identify a body with broken teeth? Later that same day, according to a surveillance video, Walshe traveled to a Home Depot in Rockland wearing a black surgical mask and gloves and made a cash purchase. Walshe bought $450 worth of cleaning supplies, including mops, a bucket, tarps, goggles, a hatchet, and baking soda. Anna's cell phone pinged in the area of Walshe's Cohasset home on that day. The next day, Walshe was at it again. On January 3rd, the day that Anna had booked a flight to return to D.C., Google search history revealed Brian was searching for what happens to hair on a dead body? What is the rate of decomposition of a body found in a plastic bag compared to on a surface in the woods? And can baking soda mask or make a body smell good? That same day, cell phone data tracked Walshe's whereabouts to an apartment complex in Abington. Surveillance video shows he exited his car with a heavy garbage bag and put it into a dumpster. Later, he traveled to another apartment complex in the same town where he again discarded items in a dumpster. These garbage bags were taken away and incinerated by the time police tracked them down. January 4th, police in D.C. and Cohasset are notified by employees at Anna's workplace, real estate company Tishman Speyer in D.C., that she did not show up for work. Prosecutors say this is the first time police have been alerted that Anna is missing and that Brian had not notified anyone at this time. According to Brian Walshe's defense attorney, he called her workplace to ask whether they knew of her whereabouts before the employer called police. Brian leaves a voicemail for a friend saying, Anna hasn't been in touch for a few days, adding that he's trying to reach anyone who may have been in touch with her. He ends with, I'm sure everything is fine. That same day, Cohasset police went to Anna Walshe's home for a well-being check. Officers noticed that the seats in Brian's Volvo are down and that there was a plastic liner in the back of the car. Later, forensic analysis would reveal the presence of blood. According to prosecutors, Walshe visited Home Goods and TJ Maxx to buy towels and bath mats and visited Lowe's to buy squeegees and a trash can that same day. For the first time, Brian speaks with investigators and provides details of his whereabouts for the last few days. January 5th, Cohasset police announced Anna Walshe is missing and asked the public to come forward with any information, saying she was last seen shortly after midnight on New Year's Day. That same day, police noticed that the plastic liner is gone from Brian Walshe's vehicle and the carpet of the car showed fresh vacuum streaks. Cell phone data shows Walshe went to Swampscott, where his mother lives, and traveled to the corner of an apartment complex where there is a dumpster. 10 trash bags that originated from this dumpster contained bloodstains, cleaning materials, a hacksaw, a hatchet, a purse, and boots worn by Anna Walshe, and her COVID-19 vaccination card. January 6th, a massive ground search is launched by police, including K-9 officers and search and rescue teams in the wooded areas near the Walshe home. Later that day, a fire breaks out in the attic of another Cohasset home where Anna lived until a few months ago. The police chief later says the fire is a very strange coincidence, but the Massachusetts Department of Fire Services determined that the cause of the fire was accidental. January 7th, investigators receive an email saying, quote, we have the so-named Anna Walshe with us here. We had a deal worth $127,000. She messed up. read the email. It goes on to say, "We have her here with us, and if she doesn't pay the money, then she'll never be back. And we know that the police and the FBI are involved. Good luck finding us." Investigators said the email, which was sent to a Cohasset Police Department detective, was suspicious because it did not put forth a timeline to respond to the demand and did not include contact information. At least 6 investigators are tasked with driving to the North Shore of Massachusetts and watching surveillance video to try to verify Walshe's timeline of events. Investigators do not observe Walshe on video at any of the locations he claimed to be on January 1st. A ground search of the area around the Walshe's home, including 20 troopers, 3 canine teams, and a state police air wing, along with draining the pool at the home and a search of a nearby stream, yields no positive results. Cohasset Police and Massachusetts State Police announced the search for Anna Walshe has ended. January 8th, investigators execute a search warrant for the Walshe's Cohasset home and find blood and a bloody and damaged knife in the basement. Brian Walshe, 46, is arrested and charged with misleading a police investigation. Anna has now been missing for 1 week. January 9th, Walshe is arraigned and pleads not guilty to a charge of misleading police. Prosecutors explained that no evidence has been found of Anna Walshe taking a rideshare from the couple's home on January 1st. This false information caused a delay in the investigation. Prosecutors released an affidavit in support of a criminal complaint that describes Brian Walshe's statements to police as a clear attempt to mislead and delay investigators. The judge sets bail at $500,000 cash. At this time, prosecutors only go as far as to say that the disappearance of Anna Walshe is suspicious. January 10th, police revealed that a search of a garbage transfer station in Peabody included the recovery of several cutting instruments, including a hacksaw and a rug believed to contain biological evidence. Moving to January 17th, an arrest warrant charging Brian Walshe with murder is issued for the death of his wife, according to Norfolk District Attorney Michael Morrissey. January 18th, Brian Walshe is arraigned in Quincy District Court on charges of murder and disinterring a body without authority. Prosecutor Lynn Balin lays out the prosecution theory that Walshe dismembered his wife and disposed of her remains in dumpsters. Walshe enters a plea of not guilty and is held without bail. His attorney at the time, Tracy Minor, issues the following statement. "In my experience, where, as here, the prosecution leaks so-called evidence to the press before they provide it to me, their case isn't that strong. When they have a strong case, they give me everything as soon as possible. We shall see what they have and what evidence is admissible in court, where the case will ultimately be decided." Several months later, after a grand jury indictment for the murder charges in March, Walshe is arraigned in Norfolk County Superior Court on April 27th and again pleads not guilty. At the hearing, prosecutor Greg Connor lays out a spate of new details from the investigation. Among them, Anna Walshe had taken out approximately $2.7 million in life insurance on herself, where Brian Walshe is the sole beneficiary. Walshe is again ordered to be held without bail. At this time, no trial date has been set. Moving on, in a bizarre footnote, the judge presiding over the Brian Walshe case is no stranger to high-profile murder trials. Judge Beverly Cannoni is the same judge who presided over the trial of Karen Reed, which ended in a deadlock earlier this year. Friends of this channel will remember the Karen Reed case as one of the cases that we have followed closely. Reed is accused of killing her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, by running him over with her SUV. Reed's trial took a turn when the unprofessional conduct of a Massachusetts state trooper took center stage. Trooper Michael Proctor admitted on the stand to making several insulting comments about Reed over text during the beginning of the investigation into O'Keefe's death. Proctor wrote that he hated one of Reed's attorneys and joked about not finding nude photos when going through Reed's phone. Messages included remarks on Reed's medical condition, comments about her body and how he hoped that Reed kills herself. "She's a whack job," Proctor admitted to texting during testimony. "Yes, she's a babe. Weird Fall River accent, though. No ass." Proctor was the case officer for the Reed case, the same role he holds in the Walshe murder investigation. Already, and to the shock of no one, attorneys representing Walshe have indicated that they intend to file a motion over Trooper Proctor's questionable conduct. Proctor is currently suspended without pay for his actions as lead investigator in the Karen Reed case. It is unclear how long he will be off the job. And finally, last December, Walshe lost his private attorney because he could no longer afford her services. He has since been appointed a public defender. As we said earlier, as of the date of this recording, no trial date has yet been set. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. Obviously, a fascinating case, a tragic case. We're talking about a mother of three having lost her life and her body never being recovered. It's going to be a difficult case for prosecutors to prove, but as you can tell, there is a mountain of circumstantial evidence that they have to work with. We will, of course, continue to follow this case and provide you with more details as they arrive. As always, please make sure that you check out the new episodes that we have coming out every Friday on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And we have a brand new membership program that we recently launched, so please check out the details by clicking the join button on our YouTube channel. And thank you for joining us for this special episode of Courtroom Confidential Case Notes.